Sunday, the Ridgely Theater in Fort Worth had the biggest day in its entire history. It sold more than The Godfather, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Superman, and Love Story. But the biggest surprise to theater employees is the number of parents bringing young children to see Alien. Did you know that this was an R-rated movie when you brought him?
Yes, we did.
Are you sorry you brought him?
Yes, I am.
Are you glad you saw it?
Yeah.
Are you sorry, sir, that you brought your son along to see Alien?
No, ma'am, I think he should have seen it. It's something that he needs to know, that things like that could happen in life. That could be a true story based on, science. We never know what's going on the outside of the world.
Did the movie scare you at all?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
We take him to see a lot of horror pictures and things like that because we like horror movies. We're horror buffs, I guess.
Would you recommend to your little friends who are your age to go see it?
No, I wouldn't.
According to the National Association of Broadcasters Code, television cannot show you the more violent scenes from Alien. Several adults have walked out of the movie, but no parents with children have been seen leaving early. At $4 a ticket, perhaps they feel they have too much invested. Or maybe moviegoers don't equate sci-fi fantasy with real violence. Or maybe, as psychologists keep telling us, we Americans are becoming more and more immune to excessive behavior. Bobby Wygant, the Texas News.
In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
Truth is that when I came into office, I asked, right? I was like, all right, is there the lab somewhere where we're keeping the alien specimens in spaceship? They did a little bit of research, and the answer was no.
I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and distrust. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar track with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, and eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in the morning area of Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at majority major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns in retrograde orbits or J-hooks. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change.
Isn't it curious how we have so little trouble entertaining all kinds of horrific narratives involving hideous, monstrous creatures from beyond, engineered to destroy life without remorse or pity, maybe seeded by other alien races who regard us as inferior life forms? And somehow in the cosmic evolutionary context of science fiction, these are not unthinkable possibilities. And ever since the 1979 Alien franchise, that alone has produced how many sequels and crossovers and video games and all the rest, to the delight of millions and millions of people. And of course, in the allegedly vast universe said to have been created by an impersonal Big Bang billions of years ago, such monstrous aliens would be just one possible version of alien life alongside the presumably benevolent and beautiful species as well. So perhaps it all balances out in the mind of the moviegoer and the staunch defender of an ever-expanding Copernican cosmos. But, this particular conception by director Ridley Scott and, of course, designer H.R. Giger, as most of you, I'm sure, are familiar. It pushed the envelope of alien-based horror cinema by, introducing aliens who they didn't merely eat or kill their prey, but would also use them as hosts for their parasitic offspring, who are birthed by ripping through the chest of the poor soul who was implanted by the egg-laying face-hugger. And I gotta say, that does seem like a bit of a morose irony today, in 2023, while the U.S. government is teasing and hyping the UFO, UAP phenomenon like never before with these congressional hearings and everything else, and the mainstream media just, eating it up and pushing it out. And all of this right on the heels of, the super deadly worldwide flu, where the authorities were adamant about deterring people from taking certain well-established drugs known for their effectiveness against parasitic diseases, curiously enough. And now, not surprisingly, they're trying to walk back all that censorship and deny that they ever did demonize those particular drugs. The FDA has now apparently approved ivermectin, and very interesting. Or at least it's being debated in a way that was previously unthinkable. But as the news cycle moves on, the corruption mounts on every side, and more stuff keeps coming out about everything, whether it's just the senseless, meat grinder going on in Eastern Europe, the financial self-destruction of Western nations, and pretty much, a headlong rush into a digitized economy. I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point, but so on top of it all, we got the UAPs hitting the prime time, and we, these whistleblowers, quote unquote, in Congress. And even if it's simply to just aid in the distraction from the coronated crime of the century, it's pretty noteworthy, but I do, of course, believe that it's more than that, and preparing for whatever the next big play, the next big move in the script is going to be.
How outraged would you be, Shermichael, if we find out that the Pentagon is failing audits year over year because they're spending money all on recreating alien technology, or technology like the ones that they've seen, where it looks like a drone, it hovers, it travels at very high altitudes and high speeds? What would you make of that? Would you be like, oh, that's a good use of the Pentagon's budget, or would you be a little bit pissed off?
I would be curious. I would be pissed that they're lying and not telling us the truth. And I also would wonder, how much do they know about the universe that they're not telling us? How much do they know about our own existence that they're not telling us? I would imagine if they've had encounters with these beings, I presume they've communicated with them over the past several decades. I'm sure they've learned a lot more than how to fly a flying saucer or advanced technology. I'm sure some of the scientists and researchers that are involved asked piercing questions about our own existence. Why are we here? What does the future tell us about our projection and where we're going? I want to know those questions, Jess. Or the answers to those questions, I should say.
Yeah, we have the questions. We need the answers.
The answers to the questions of our very existence in the universe. Because those questions remain open and unanswered, there's no God that's revealed himself to us and explained the nature of his creation through his word. I mean, it's pretty bizarre to hear, professional news people, quote unquote, talking like this, as if it were a scene from a Spielberg movie or something. And even though the entire topic of outer space and aliens and the Great Deception has been something many of us have been discussing for years now, it's still pretty trippy to see this progression taking place. Speaking of which, shout out to my friend Mama Bear for sharing this article with me from MSN.com, and it was mirrored from some other website before that, and just blatantly articulating something I've been yapping about for several years as well, titled Non-Human UFO Revelations, Ex-Air Force Intelligence Officials' Testimony Mirrors Ancient Kabbalistic Teachings. An ex-Air Force intelligence official recently testified before Congress, confirming the presence of unidentified flying objects with non-human entities, adding a new dimension of credibility to long-standing assertions of extraterrestrial existence. Notably, the testimony mirrors beliefs found within Kabbalah, a centuries-old Jewish mystical tradition. In a recent live transmission, Yoel Ben Habib, a Kabbalah scholar, discussed the parallels between these contemporary revelations and the teachings of Kabbalah. According to him, Kabbalah acknowledges other forms of life and civilizations, a perspective recorded in Jewish texts over 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. The Kabbalah's wisdom offers a holistic understanding of the universe, suggesting the existence of beings on other planets. The mystical teachings documented in various books like the Torah are believed to allude to other forms of life. Well, we'll get back to the Torah in a second. But Ben Habib highlighted 3 Kabbalistic books: the Book of Enoch, Yesodam, and the Principle of Wisdom. These ancient works contain explicit references to non-human beings, their names, and their physical dwellings, offering a profoundly spiritual perspective on the UFO phenomenon. For example, the Book of Enoch, a classic work of Jewish mysticism, narrates the tale of the Watchers, beings that descended to Earth on a location known as Mount Hermon. This text describes their technology and the various dimensions they inhabit. See also Psychedelics in Judaism, Kabbalah and ET Encounters. The existence of extraterrestrial beings is no novelty within Kabbalah. Jewish mystics claim to have had contact with beings from other worlds. Ben Habib mentioned a secret Kabbalah book titled Yesodam, which supposedly outlines how to safely engage with these entities. Interestingly, the Principle of Wisdom by Rabbi Eliyahu de Vidas, a 16th century Kabbalist, discusses the presence of spiritual beings residing beneath the sea. It tells the story of a rabbi who skeptically ventured under the sea only to encounter these entities and receive their help to resurface. Beyond Jewish mysticism, Ben Habib pointed out that several ancient civilizations, including the Sumerians, Aztecs, and Chinese, have narratives of beings descending to Earth. These stories often involve imparting knowledge to humans, a theme also prevalent in Kabbalah texts and the Bible. For instance, the Dogon tribe of Africa was known for its advanced understanding of the cosmos. They supposedly knew about a particular star that wasn't discovered until way later. Their spiritual guide was believed to be in contact with extraterrestrial beings, which could account for their unusual knowledge. I forget which star the Dogon people supposedly knew about. validating ancient wisdom. The recent testimonies from former U.S. intelligence officers and Navy officials before Congress have corroborated the existence of UFOs and, by extension, the potential for ET life. This official acknowledgement resonates with the perspectives found within Kabbalah and other ancient wisdom traditions. The unfolding revelation indicate that modern society may just be catching up with the wisdom and understanding that ancient civilizations, guided by their spiritual systems like Kabbalah, have held for millennia. As the world comes to grips with these revelations, the Kabbalah continues to provide a timeless spiritual lens through which to view the cosmos and our place within it. This content was partially produced with the help of AI tools and was reviewed and published by Benzinga editors. Of course it was. So AI telling us about the occult origins of ETs and the concept of communicating with them and traveling to other worlds. Fascinating, as that was essentially one of the primary connections which sent me down this entire rabbit hole years ago, as I was reading about the whole concept of space and the solar system being derived from Kabbalah. Now here it is on MSN being openly celebrated and taught. They do give a link to this Yoel Ben Habib's YouTube channel, but it's all in Spanish. So if you speak Spanish, go check it out. But there you go. Yet what the AI journalists will certainly never disclose is what the Bible actually has to say about those watchers who came down and who they really are and what their eternal fate will inescapably be. And it is that topic of the fate of the fallen angels that has been on my mind quite a bit the past few weeks. And it's interesting, part of what kind of prompted that was listening to a podcast episode from a brother I've been following since the very beginning of my whole journey into conspiratorial Bible prophecy stuff, or whatever we might call it. He's an incredibly gifted teacher who's helped countless people sift through many difficult topics and deal with our New World Order freakout syndrome, and put out a fantastic documentary called Ancient Aliens Debunked. Most appropriately for the topic of this video, is that whole article saying that Kabbalah is the whole ancient aliens narrative, right? And that's basically what it's saying. And then more recently tackled the whole pre-trib rapture versus pre-wrath, and so much more. And of course, I'll put a link in the description to this particular podcast episode, as with all the other things I'm referencing. But for those of you who are still not familiar with the exceptional work of Chris White, and like many times in the past, I found myself being quite challenged by what he had to say recently, and also pretty convicted on a number of levels, which I'll get into. And it was very sobering, both figuratively and literally, as I'll get into in a moment. But there's also kind of an odd moment just stepping back and thinking about enclosed cosmology. And an aspect of enclosed cosmology that perhaps doesn't get a lot of focus from the flat earth community or the the globe believing community, or virtually anyone, because of the nature of it. And that is the topic of hell, or the underworld, or Sheol, or Gehenna, or whatever term and angle you want to come at it. Understandably not a comfortable topic for most people. And it's not hard to see why. So essentially, he was talking about the doctrine of once saved, always saved, and how he had come to change his position on that. Funnily enough, that was not the controversial aspect to me. I think I was more kind of absorbed by what he was sharing about his own testimony, and the whole issue of backsliding and thinking about hell and the reality of hell, and even on a personal level for him. And it's weird, because as I was listening to that and going, I'd already kind of confronted that whole topic of once saved, always saved, however many years back, and so I'm in agreement with his new position, and I have been for some time. But it's still kind of, I wrestled with what he was sharing because of talking about himself, and I was like, no dude, you can't. I don't know, there was something very, I don't know, maybe it's just because it's like you're hearing a hero, one of your kind of heroes or whatever, just be kind of vulnerable or something in a way that it was hard to hear, but it was good. And I think it took a lot of courage for him to talk about that on a number of levels. But then, interestingly enough, I was kind of listening to that while I have been going through my own crazy, wrestling the past few months, starting with having some pretty intense dental work done, namely removing a bunch of teeth on the top set of teeth, and trying to get used to replacements and the healing process and learning to talk. And some days are harder than others, but it's been going okay, albeit a very humbling experience, to tell the truth. And even at the beginning of that, it was very convicting, because knowing that I've just been wrestling for, I think it had been about 5 years, wrestling with my own. In his case, he was talking about alcohol and things like that. And I've wrestled with a lot of things and a lot of different addictions and different phases and things. And yet, for the past 5 years, nicotine and tobacco has been something that I've known I need to quit. And especially when you've just gone through that of like having had a bunch of teeth that had been bad for a long time, and it honestly had gotten to the point where it was impacting my health pretty significantly, to the point where it's like, if I don't really deal with this soon, I mean, in a few more months or however long, I could end up in the hospital and have it just kind of get out of control. And that knowing that there's like low-level infection going on constantly, and you're fighting this, and it's kind of a losing battle in the long run. So there was kind of the health issue, like you either get it dealt with or you're gonna die, more or less, very sooner than later. And so that was kind of a harsh reality to have to face up to. But then I was glad I was in the position to where I was able to get that taken care of and immediately start feeling a lot better, but then also continuing to feel convicted about, like, well, I have this addiction that I've been making excuses for a good 5 years, basically ever since my marriage just imploded. And it was something I fell back into after many years of kind of being free from it. And so, why am I talking about all this and my teeth and smoking and Chris White? Well, because he also talked about hell and the reality of hell, and even suggesting, like, hey, go on, if you want to binge watch something, go on YouTube and watch testimonies of people who've died and had visions of hell, or God showed them hell. And I was like, whatever, dude. Didn't want to go there. But then, honestly, so like about 3 weeks ago, I just started really not feeling well and going like, I gotta quit now, and made up my mind that I was gonna just, go for it. And then as soon as I did, it was like I found myself in a weird detox, but I don't know, it felt very spiritual on top of physical, and I don't know how much is what. And it was like 3 days where I basically didn't sleep, and I was just praying and crying, and just having to kind of like really deal with how much damage I've done to my body over the years, and basically just really wrestling with my own mortality and the issue of God. Like I'm praying for healing and praying that I'm not there, but for whatever reason, as I'm thinking about all this stuff in kind of a deeper way, I think pulling me to contemplating, the reality of facing death, not just like sometime in the future or, whatever, but like that it could be any time, really, that God, has appointed every man wants to die and then face the judgment. And for whatever reason, I've never been so gripped by the reality of death and the prospect of being separated from him for eternity. Even though, I learned about that when I was 7 years old and prayed the prayer as a child, and rededicated my life to God, half a dozen times throughout, high school and in the years beyond. And I don't know. But yeah, you read about what the Bible says, what Jesus says, and I found some really good sermons by this guy he has a channel. I think I've played him before, actually, a few years ago, but Discover the Book Ministries, and he's talking about a lot of stuff that kind of pertain to what we're talking about here with the end times and, the locusts that come out of the pit in Revelation, and, what was hell created for? It wasn't created for us. It was created for the fallen angels. It was created for the demonic beings who rebelled. But I mean, if you can point to the Bible and claim that it teaches a flat, stationary Earth, which I believe it does, but it's even that much more explicit about the reality of the bottomless pit, the reality of this place. Jesus talked about hell more than almost anyone in Scripture, and he warns about it again and again. And there's no getting around what Jesus tells us is a real place. And it's so it was just funny as I was thinking about, Chris White, I've just wanted him to go there and if he gets into flat earth, man, he'd be a killer apologist or whatever, exponent of enclosed cosmology. But then I'm hearing him talk about the reality of hell and being himself brought to that kind of, fearful, kind of sobering reckoning with God and with, the sin in his own life, and the eternal just the sheer weight of eternal consequences, which we don't like to go there. We don't like that aspect of the gospel, right? Heaven and hell. Even though everyone's heard of it. It's why so many people get turned off to the Bible, or they think it's too harsh, or that a loving God would never banish someone to a place of darkness and weeping and gnashing of teeth. But yeah, it's funny that, if you woke up in hell, the last thing you'd be sitting there worried about would be whether you were inside a spherical ball, or the physics, what are the physics of hell? Nobody debates any of that. We spend so much time talking about the age of the earth, or how did the flood happen, or where is heaven, the throne, literally, is there like a literal footstool, and what are the pillars under it? But it's like all this stuff that we debate and get into weird discussions with. Suddenly nobody, that just doesn't, it's absurd. It's absurd when you think about eternal judgment. And it kind of struck me in a weird way that, maybe that's the simplicity to be brought back to, that okay, there's so many questions that I still wonder about, and I look forward to being able to learn the truth one day in eternity, whether it's about, what is the firmament really made out of, and are there really windows and doors and, deep springs under the ocean, and how do the plate tectonics really work, or is that all made up? I mean, the angelic realms, so many questions, but just the basic concept of the 3-tiered cake or whatever, the reality of it, just the reality of there's a place reserved for the demons, a place that was made for Satan and his minions, a place that the Bible warns about, that Abaddon, Apollyon will be given the key in the end, and all these things are going to fly out and torture people on earth for 5 months. And how that all really works, I have no idea, but it's real. And again, it's is it a place that we could dig down to and prove? The only way we even know is because God has told us. And so, yeah, the ancient aliens some are in chains, as Jude tells us, awaiting judgment, and some are roaming the earth. And when they confronted Jesus, they begged him not to send them into the abyss before the appointed time, because they knew it's coming. They know their time is only so long, and then it's done. And, man, So, yeah, long story short, I guess I haven't smoked in about 3 weeks now, and going okay, although in some ways I feel like I'm going through this process of healing and purging, and I don't know. I don't know what's going on with me. So I appreciate your prayers, both physically and just more deeply, like the spiritual sobering of it's weird. I didn't really realize how much I'd been relying on it to numb myself to a lot of pain that I've still been carrying a lot of it, instead of surrendering it to God and seeking Him. And, it's easy to just numb it. And I'm not sitting here trying to say that, like, if you're smoking, then you're going to hell, or you're drinking, or that, the Bible says that anyone who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it is sinning. And when you give in to habitual sin and eventually start to rationalize it and go down this road, it eventually, forces you to, like, give it up or, turn from God. And eventually, it just becomes deeper and deeper bondage. And I've known I've been in bondage to this. And so it's been kind of a miraculous, weird intervention, I think, just to be finally kind of free from that. But I know I'm still, kind of beginning a new stage or whatever. It's been weird. It's been very, honestly, kind of humiliating to try and talk with plastic teeth. But, if God is going to give me more time, then, what am I going to talk about other than what He's doing in my life and in my heart, and in the light of eternity, and the perspective that I think I'm still, trying to grasp. And dude, I watched a couple of those. I watched like 2 just randomly on YouTube like a week ago of this one guy, Khalil, talking about he was doing LSD and died and went to, and it's like, if this guy's this guy's an actor, then he's a better actor than any NASA actor I've ever seen. It's just, why?
But everybody's in there screaming, and it's so hot. But the thing that's so bothersome is the screams. Like, those screams are so loud, but I heard my scream above everybody else's. It was like, I felt like I know that I probably wasn't really screaming out loud, but it was coming from me. That's all I could hear at a certain point. And then I eventually hit this ground, and then I hit the ground again, and then that's when things got really, like, they were already undescribably bad at that point, but they were really, like, it's the level of bad that occurs there only increases. It's almost as if it's like an infinite level of, like, just suffering, because
it was chilling to think that this is a real place, and that like Jesus says, do not fear man, who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul, but fear God, who can throw the body and the soul in hell. And to think that God has that power, and He has that prerogative. I think it's not even just about the power, it's about, do you fear God, and that He has the ability to do as He sees fit? That He will decide justice based on the standard of holiness and the standard of His Son and the shed blood and nothing else. Well, you can't add to it. You can't earn it. You can't bargain with God. He isn't impressed with our numbers or with whatever we think we've done to earn favor in the eyes of men, but that we are saved through the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, who then went and descended and declared victory over the spirits in prison. He went there. And so when we think about all this stuff going on, I mean, maybe this sounds insane to people, I don't know, to be thinking about hell in the midst of everything going on in the world, in the economy, and the jabs, and the what the heck, is going on with, is there alien technology like self-assembling in people's bodies right now that's connecting to the, the smart grid and all this stuff that's still kind of like, I don't need horror movies anymore because there's the real world. You know what I'm saying? As crazy and scary as all that is, or like not being able to buy or sell, or not being able to travel, or whatever your scariest issues are with quote-unquote conspiracy, end times, last days, fear porn, prophecy talk. It just pales in comparison to thinking of spending eternity apart from God. And in a weird way, it's like, this is not a fun experience. It's not a fun rabbit hole to go down. It's not it's, hole, the pit. To think about the pit. But in a weird way, like the perspective it gives with all this other stuff is like insane. To think about that, like we're all so fragile. And none of us know. You could die in something completely unrelated to whatever you think is the big danger. None of us know. But we also know that we're all going to face him. Even if you have 40, 50, 60 more years, it's in the grand scheme of history, that's nothing. And even if you live to be old and gray and prosperous and wealthy and have tons of grandchildren and everything you could want in this life, it comes to an end. And then you have the question of eternity and where will I spend it? And all the physics questions about what's the sun and moon really made out of and how high do the heavens go? All that, it will be amazing things to ask God, but I want to know that I'm going to spend it with him. I want to know and have, assurance. I want eternal security. I think that's what I come out of this. And I don't think that is a false hope, or that is a false, I don't believe that eternal security is a false doctrine. But I also don't think, this idea that like, well, if you've ever confessed Jesus, then you're good. It's clearly not biblical, according to Jesus. Many will say, Lord, Lord, didn't we do this in your name? Didn't we prophesy? Didn't we do miracles? I've never done a miracle like we read in Scripture, but even if you do, that's not where your security comes from. And I've also known people in my life who at once were very close fellow Christians of mine, and now they are preaching a straight up New Age, Luciferian, pantheistic, false gospel. And they reject the doctrine of hell outright. And that is just one of the most horrifying things to see. People who grew up in the church and who know, and yet they reject what Jesus has plainly taught because it's too hard, and so they choose something else. And the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. I would rather fear God, fear the power that he has to throw Satan in the lake of fire for eternity. It's not going to be much of a fight than to fear the enemy, to fear those who serve him for a short time, and then they're done. It really changes your whole perspective on every New World Order scenario. Whether there's real craft and real biologics or real demonic alien human hybrids and alien greys and whatever else. Revelation tells us about all kinds of crazy stuff that's going to happen. It's going to go down and people are going to be losing their minds because of the wrath of God being prepared. The birth pains becoming increasing, and it's either going to strike terror into the hearts of men, or it's going to fill you with hope and joy and anticipation for the day of the Lord. And I think I'm going to wrap this up. I wasn't sure how I was going to get through this and kind of try and tie it all together. The ancient aliens, we know who they are. They have been debunked. And God has told us where they they'll go, and he does not want you to join them. But many will. And I think I'm just gonna close this with this rad version of a Petra song that I found recently, and it kind of just brings it home. Thanks for watching. God bless.
I believe in God the Father, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son. I believe in the virgin birth. I believe in the man of sorrows, bruised for iniquities. I believe in the Lamb who was crucified and hung between two thieves. I believe in the resurrection on the third and glorious day, and I believe in the empty tomb and the stone and the ancient rolled away. He descended and set the captives free, and now he sits at God's right hand and prepares a place for me. This is my creed, the witness I have had, the faith that has endured. This truth is assured through the darkest ages past. Though persecuted, it will last, and I will hold steadfast through this creed. I believe His Son, His Spirit, to conquer and to reveal, to lead us into truth and light, to baptize and to seal. I believe that He will come back the way He went away, and receive us all unto Himself. But no man knows the day. This is my creed, the witness I have had, the faith that has endured. This truth is assured through the darkest ages past. Though persecuted, it will last, and I will hold steadfast through this creed. I believe He is the judge of all men, small and great, the resurrected souls of men receive from Him their fate. Some to death, some to life, some to the